In this short video, we're going to cover sections 12.1 and 12.2 so that you're able to do your homework in MyLabs Plus. This will review just some visual displays of data and measures of central tendencies such as mean, median, and mode. You can see that we're going to cover three big ideas here. We're going to cover how to make a grouped frequency distribution with a histogram, how to make a circle graph, and then how to find mean, median, and mode for both grouped and ungrouped data. So let's start with a grouped frequency distribution. Just a couple of rules. First rule is that the data that you're given should only fit into one class. So, for example, if I have a group that goes from 0 to 4, the next group can't start at 4. It'd have to start at 5. And that would go from 5 to 9. Otherwise, if it started at 4, I wouldn't know whether to put 4 in this group or 4 in that group. Second rule is that the classes have to be the same width. So what does a width mean? If I go from 0 to 4, then I have a width of 5. The width is telling you how many data values fall in that particular set. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are 5 data values. A lot of people get that confused and think that it's only 4 because they see the 4 here at the end and don't realize that they've also had to count the number 0. Classes don't overlap, so we've touched base on that when we talked about data only fitting into one class. And typically you use 5 to 12 classes. So you're going to be told this number, so you don't need to worry about that too much, but just realize that that's your typical number. So here's what this distribution is going to look like. In this example here, we've got a high value of 72. That's the biggest number, and you can see that number located right here. And we have a low value of 12. So the lowest value that we see here is 12. So we could start our classes from 10 to 19. The next group would then be from 20 to 29. The next group would be from 30 to 39, etc. We're going to go all the way up so that the highest number is included in a class. So that's why I've said here we'd go all the way up to 70 to 79. And then what you're going to do is make a series of tally marks. And you're just going to account for each number. So the number 18 falls in that group. The number 60 I would put in. The number 72. I'm back here at 20, so I put a tally mark here. 15, 12, 26, 16, 29, 26. And I'm going to just keep tallying them. So when I get up to 5, I would make a tally mark that shows 5. And then the next column that I have will actually just be whatever that number ends up being. So let's go ahead and do this on another slide so that we can see it nicely. Here's another example, and let's work through this one all the way. So this one says to make a frequency distribution, and we're also going to talk about a histogram and how to do that from the frequency distribution. So we've got some exam scores here. It's a sociology class, and it was a 70-point exam. It says to use 5 classes with a uniform class width of 5 points and use a lower limit of 45 for the first class. So that's going to tell us that we've got to go from 45 to 49. That's 5 because 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, that's 5 scores. So remember, it's not going to go all the way up to 50, so be careful about that. The next one would go from 50 to 54, from 55 to 59, from 60 to 64, 65 to 69, and then we're going to go from 70 to 74. And now we're going to go through and we're going to tally this data. So 60 we're going to put in. 63 we're going to put in. 64 we're going to put in. 52 comes up here. 60 comes down to here. 58 comes down to here. 63 comes down to here. And I'm going to go ahead, and when I come back, you're going to see this completed. So you can see that I went ahead and just finished my tally marks. I would have a column actually to the right. I ran out of space, but what I did was went through and I actually then just turned those tallies into numbers. So 3, 14, 16, 17, and 4. And in this particular group right here, there was actually a 0. So that's how we make a frequency distribution. Now from that, I can construct a histogram. So let's do that on a different slide. Okay, so you can see that all I've done is carried over this frequency distribution from the previous slide. And to turn that into a histogram, I'm going to run the frequency along the y-axis. So you can see that I need to go up to 17. So I'll probably count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. We'll take it up to 18. And then I need to do some connected bars. So what I need to realize is that it is going to be this lower class limit that I use for my bars. So I'm actually going to need to take it up one further so that I can see where that bar goes to. So I'm going to show that I've got a little break because clearly I usually wouldn't start at 45. And 45 to 49 needs to go up to 3. So it's going to come right up to about here. So the beginning of that bar is 45. I'm going to label the next one 50. So see all the numbers underlined in red is what I'm going to show. I need to take that one up to 14. Think for a second. What do you think the next number that I'm going to write is? If you guessed 55, you're right. So I'm going to have a bar that goes up to 16. Then a bar that goes up to 17. A bar that goes up to 4. Oops. And then another bar that doesn't go up to anything, but I'm going to label that right-hand side 75, but it's off my screen a little bit. So I really want you to pay attention to that because that's going to be what I grade you on for the test. Do you know how to build the histogram and which numbers run along the x-axis, which again are the first numbers that you see here in your classes, and that the frequency is what runs along the y-axis. Now, if you're actually making a circle graph, each of the angles in your circle graph should represent the percentage that's in that particular section. So for example, food, 30%. So I should take 360 times the decimal form of 30%, and then that's going to tell me the angle that needs to be that angle there. And I'm going to do that for each of them. So 360 times 0.25, 360 times 0.10, etc., etc. Now think about it. There's not much that we can do in MyLabs Plus to assess you on a circle graph. Can you read the circle graph is important. And then also, could you tell us what the angle measure should be? So as long as you can remember to change the percentages into a decimal and multiply it by 360, you'll be in good shape. So you can see in this problem here, it asks you to actually make a circle graph. So you need to take each of those percentages, multiply them by 360, and that will tell you the angle that you need to have for that particular section of the circle graph. So if we take 360 times 0.33, 360 times 0.25, and we're going to do that all the way down. That's going to give you the angle measures that you're going to need to have. So what I've done is taken a picture of one of your homework problems. You can see that in your homework, all that it's going to ask you to do is take those percentages that you see over on the side and turn them into degrees. So you're going to take each of them and multiply them by 360. Now let's look at another homework problem. This homework problem is just slightly different. So what you're going to do first is still you need to change each of these into degrees. So you're going to do 0.18 times 360, 0.35 times 360. And then from the multiple choices, you need to say, okay, well, which of those best represents the degree measures that are there? So look at the difference like between C and D looking at the green portion. Okay, so that's what you're going to do to determine your answer. Look at the difference between C and D for the E portion. Okay, which of those best represents those degree measures that you have found? And one last thing on graphs and the homework problems from this section. You can see that this particular problem, it's number 7 on my homework assignment, shows a graph up on the top that is receipts and outlays. So it's a red line and a blue line. And it says the graph shows government receipts and outlays, both on budget and off budget, for 1991 to 2001. Plot a point for each year and draw a line graph showing the federal surplus or the deficit. So what that is asking you to do for each of those years, starting at 1991, 92, etc., you're going to put a point, and I'm going to do it for the last one for 2001, on the red, and you're going to find the point that corresponds to it on the blue and subtract those two numbers. That's the number that then appears down here in the graph. Okay, so you're going to take those two graphs, subtract the higher from the lower, and then that's going to be your new number line. That's tricked people a few times on past assignments, and I think that there's 2 or 3 of them that are just like that, so I want to make sure that you have an understanding of what you need to do there. So that brings us to mean, median, and mode, and most of you have done a lot of work with mean, median, and mode. You may not have seen the formulas written the way that you see them written here, but most of you understand how to find them. So the mean is the average. You add all your numbers up and divide by how many there are. And that's just that fancy formula here. We call the mean in higher mathematics X bar. So that's why you see an X with a bar over it. Remember that the fancy symbol here is sum of. So the sum of all of your X values divided by, and then N stands for how many there are. Now the median is the middle number in an ordered set. So the first thing you need to do is order the data from least to greatest and then find the middle number. Sometimes that middle number doesn't land exactly on a number. It might land between two numbers, in which case you'd have to find the average. And then the mode is the most frequently occurring data value. You can have more than one mode. If you have 2 data values that both appear 5 times, then you write them both for the mode. If you do not have a mode, don't put 0, because that would mean 0 is your mode. Make sure you put none. Now, a weighted mean may be new for some of you. So to find a weighted mean, the difference with a weighted mean is that there is more than one item that has a specific value. So you can see in this table here, there's 8 employees that have a salary of $12,000. So what you're going to do is take X times F. I'm going to take 8 times 12,000, and I'm going to make a new column. So I'm going to have 96,000. And I'm going to do for each of these rows here, 11 times 16,000, 14 times 18,500. And with that new column, that's going to be what you add up. Now this down here, divide by how many there are. That's going to be the sum of your frequencies. So in this particular case here, let's see, 8 plus 11 is 19. Then we have 19 plus 14 would give us 33. Plus, and let's see, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 45 data values here. So we're going to add that sum together and divide it by 45 to get the weighted mean. So here's some examples here. So the first thing you're going to do is multiply. We should have 36, 14. Let's do 16 times 8. So that's going to give us 128. And then 18 times 4. 72. You're going to add that data set up, and you're going to divide that answer by this sum. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Do the same thing here. Multiply across, get a new column, add that column up, and then divide by the total number of frequencies. Here's a homework problem from a frequency table that you're going to have to be able to do. So they've given you miles per gallon, it's cut off a little bit, and then the frequency. And it says to find the mean, the median, and the mode. So for the mean, you've got to multiply each of the values by the frequencies, add that up, and divide by the 56, which is the total of the frequencies. Now, you got to find a median and a mode from this as well. So for the median, the best thing to do is write them out. So I've got one data value of 19. We've got 4 20s. We've got 4 21s, etc. I want you to write them all out and then find the middle number. And then for the mode, that's nice because you can just look at the frequencies. Well, I see that I've got 8 25s and 8 26s, and that seems to be the biggest. So there's going to be 2 modes there. Here's another homework problem for weighted average, and this one has to do with GPA. So it says, assume that the grade point values are 4.0 for an A, 3.0 for a B, etc. So you're going to actually replace where you see A, B, and C. The A is going to be a 4. The B is going to be a 3. B is going to be a 3. C is going to be a 2. And then it's a weighted average. 3 times 4. 4 times 3. 2 times 3. 4 times 2. Add that up. So let's see. 6, 8, 10, 18. And then divide by the total number of credits. So you're going to add this column up and divide by the total number of credits, and that's going to give you your GPA. One last homework problem that I want to look at with you, and this one is on figuring out what you need to get on a test to have a B test average. So they've given you an 80, you've got a 77, you've had a 84, and a 79, and you want to know what do you have to get on this last one to have an 80. We'll call an 80 being a B average. So I'm going to divide by 5 because there's 5 tests total with that unknown, and I want that to be the 80. So now to solve this, first thing you're going to do is multiply both sides by 5. That's going to get rid of that 5 in that denominator. And I think from there you should be okay. So over here then we've got 400. We've got 80 plus 77 plus 84 plus 79 plus X. So you got to add those numbers up and then subtract it from the 400. I think that takes care of all the homework issues that you may have. Let's look at one last thing. The last item that's touched upon in this particular section is on symmetries. So that's just basically a definition that I want you to understand. So you can have a uniform distribution that's straight across. If something is skewed to the left, that means you've got some data values down here on the left that are low. Skewed to the right means it's pulled to the right. You might have a bimodal distribution, which means you've got 2 modes. Okay, so just have an idea of what some of those look like so that if you need to identify them on a test, you'll be in good shape. I'm hoping that this gives you enough information in order to do the homework. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And I appreciate you guys being patient, and I'll see you next week.